any other things. What do you think about it? Yes. Yes. For blessing, okay. فضائل الأعمال. So the hadith, there are different categories. There's some of them that authentic or acceptable with no condition. Like, generally speaking, in terms of narration. Like hadith al-sahih and hadith al-hasan, for example. Like hadith da'if, acceptable with condition. Yes, مقبول مع شروط. We used, conditions of that. And the scholars that mention multiple conditions. That Allah yashtadda ضعفه should not be that very weak, weak, but there's no liar on the chain of narration, for example. أن يكون في فضائل الأعمال, that you use it not in the main subject to initiate an act of worship, but for a matter is already been established, but you used for encouragement, used for ask people to emphasize about that main meaning was already established in Sharia. For example, birr al-walidain, you have to be kind with your parent. So then you have a weak hadith in that category. Then I say, oh, that's weak, we're not going to consider, because already the general meaning was established in Sharia. And at the same time, do not consider that Rasulullah for sure have said or did, if that was coming from a weak hadith or narration. And when you mention it and narrate it, they call it, you mention it with a way, they call it sighat al-tamrid. Do not say it's for sure that Rasulullah said it. When you read it, qila, hukiya, ruwiya, it was mentioned, it was narrated. It's not the Prophet said for affirmative way. So these like some of the conditions, that related to hadith al-da'if. Some people, when they call hadith da'if, they put it in the same way as if that you said hadith al-mawdu', fabricated hadith. We have to be really careful about this. If we neglect the hadith al-da'if, a great portion of Sharia that we will neglect as well. Do you know that there are many hadiths, all the scholars agreed upon that are da'if in terms of narrations, has weak narrations, but in the same time, all of them agreed to practice with those hadiths. I'll give you examples, and you'll be surprised. لا طلاق في إغلاق. There's no divorce in the stage of إغلاق, where the person reach the level of anger he cannot even see. Like, he cannot even comprehend the situation. He will be insane in that situation. So, لا طلاق في إغلاق. It's like a complete block, where he reached the level of anger that's called إغلاق. That's weak narration, but all of them agreed to practice this. It's a rule. إدرأوا الحدود بالشبهات. It's a weak narration. Prevent the punishment if there is any doubt that, in any issue with that, it should prevent making punishment. Because Rasulullah said, لَأَنْ يُخْتِيَ الْإِمَامُ فِي الْعَفْوِ خَيْرٌ يُخْتِيَ فِي الْعُقُوبَةِ. To make mistake in terms of forgiveness better than to make a mistake in terms of punishment. So if there is any doubt, any issues, then you are not applying the punishment. That's weak narration, and that's a rule in this subject. الماء لا ينجسه ما غير لونه وطعمه إلا ما غير لونه وطعمه وريحه. The water considered as a pure, except what it changes color, its smell, and its taste. And that's weak narration. But all agreed to apply that. What's make it applicable and people practice those hadith? The understanding of the fuqaha, that when it comes to practice those hadiths. So we have to be careful and say, oh, this is a weak hadith. They know that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as he one of the great Imam of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, one of his main sources of tashri', al-amalu bil hadith al-da'if, that to practice and use the hadith al-da'if for practicing, all like in matters of Sharia, and even actually they have a rule they call تقديم الحديث الضعيف على القياس الصحيح. I don't want to go into that one, but he even considered the hadith al-da'if before even the logic that it might be stronger. So he will consider the narrations even weaker than even might be the logic or the analogical understanding from the hadith, other hadiths or other sources. And you know that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, when he collected his book called Al-Musnad, that's full of hadith da'if. Majority of the hadith were mentioned in that book. It's one of the largest book of hadith, by the way, contain a lot in a hadith da'ifa. They counted actually min masadar hadith da'if. Actually, I will even add other point you might be surprised about. Which book that's the most authentic, that's when you talk about hadith? Bukhari, yes? Do you know Bukhari has another book, for example, called Al-Adab al-Mufrad, and full of hadith da'if. Al-Adab al-Mufrad, that's narrated by Imam Bukhari himself. He has another book called Al-Adab al-Mufrad, and he contained in there many of hadith da'ifa in that book. Why is that? Because when he collected the hadith da'if, it wasn't in his mind that to neglect other hadiths for other purposes. Read the introduction, why he wrote it. It's not his purposes to tell you only consider hadith sahih and neglect hadith da'if. He's himself, he has another book, was not main reason to just to gather hadith sahih, and he could, he mentioned hadith da'ifa in that book. What's the point of this? What's the point of all of that? Because it's heard many times people, they come, oh, this is hadith da'if, Sheikh. This is not like, okay, so what's the point? It doesn't mean that hadith da'if, that means you don't practice it. And at the same time, it doesn't mean it's a hadith sahih, you have to practice it. Could be hadith sahih, but it's abrogated, mansukh. Hadith sahih, but maybe there's another stronger, authentic hadith in the same chapter. You get the point? So we have to be careful. We don't use these terminologies of hadith, which one of the special things of this ummah, min khasa'is hadhihi al-ummah, one of the things that this ummah we're blessed with, the mustalah al-hadith, the terminology of hadith. That's beautiful things that the ummah established and reached the peak of it. No other ummah care about the narrations like the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So isnad is something special, but it doesn't mean that use these terms by yourself to extract fiqh point or to extract a fatwa from there. Stay away from all of that. And yes, you study the hadith, you study all of this, but there's a one degree that has nothing to do with the fiqh. That's a fiqh, that hadith, one of the tools of fiqh. It's not the opposite. Hadith, it's one of the tools that the faqih used to extract, the ma'luma, the fa'ida, the rule. It's not the way around. I hope that, a point is to reach. And of course, we give priority to hadith sahih, but doesn't mean that we neglect the hadith al-da'if. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the best of understanding. اللهم علمنا ما جهلنا وذكرنا ما نسينا وفقنا في دين وجعلنا بعبادك الصالحين. Okay, that's fine. We'll take one question. Yes, go ahead. It depends. So it depends. Sometimes it's related to the narration, sometimes even related to the context. It's because ألا يخلو من العلة والشذوذ. Sometimes العلة في المتن أو الشذوذ في المتن وأحيانا في السند. علة في السند أو في المتن. So it comes from both ways. It's not necessarily that only from the sanad. But you are right. Actually, sometimes you find hadith موضوع. It's a fabricated hadith, but معناه صحيح. Because it's a word of wisdom that somebody said it, but mentioning that Rasulullah said it, that's its fabricated one. It's not the statement itself, it's wrong. But the wrong that to relate that to the Prophet ﷺ. You get the point? So sometimes even fabricated hadith that somebody made it up, but it's a true in meaning, but it's not true that related to the Prophet ﷺ. So that's a whole subject, that we can explore. Jazakallah khairan for your point.